shortly after the healings that supposedly were done by Joseph Smith to Brigham Young, to Heber C. Kimball, and then days later they're sick again, and then they're going out on their missions, and it's just this follow-up thing. Like you were talking about how there's power in touch, there's power in the feeling that somebody with authority.
Unpacking Mormonism and other religious trauma is meant for educational purposes only.
Well, hello there, and welcome back to Unpacking Mormonism and Other Religious Trauma. I'm Mason Westbrook, and this is my wife, Sarah. She's the director. I'm just the
boss.
I'm the employee. Yeah. So welcome today. We've spent a few episodes talking about blessings as related to the Mormon Church and even some other organizations, but mostly Mormonism. Today, we're going to talk about the blessings of healing.
Yes, it is supposed to be a Mormon superpower. We recently had a commenter kind of get after us for utilizing the term Mormon. And so I just kind of wanted to talk about that real quick first. So we both grew up and were participating in the Mormon religion from birth until, I don't know, for me about 4 years ago, and Mason about 18 months ago or so.
Something like that.
Well, we'll pretend like those are accurate numbers. But the church that we grew up in embraced the term Mormon. That was who we identified as, and it wasn't until, yes, it's the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints, Mormon. That is how we feel. It wasn't until about 3 or 4 years ago that the current sitting prophet of the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints announced that the term Mormon was a major win for Satan, and that we shouldn't use that term anymore, because we as Mormons should be offended when people call us by the nickname we've been known by for like hundreds of years, 200 years. Yeah, a long fucking time, for sure. Yeah. So anyway, for us, we were Mormon. I think I left before. So cool. Yes, and I left before Mormon was a victory for Satan, and Mason left shortly thereafter. And there is a absolutely great comedy. I don't know how to look it up. I don't even know who said it. It was hilarious though, but he did the devil must have been on the naming everything committee, and it took the naming the church's committee 200 years to figure out that's who he was, and that's why it's now Victor's name. It was really funny. Anyway, and enjoy it. We do not mean any offense by it, but it is the church that I grew up in. I grew up in the proud to be a Mormon church. And so this new rebranding is different, and I'm going to still talk about my personal experiences. We don't mean it to be offensive.
Well, then I don't think the church ever really liked the name Mormon. They accepted it because that's just what other people wanted to call them, and fine. Right. But there is a lot of just that, if you come to, we've talked about, revelation or the prophet being directed by God, it seems quite unlikely that a prophet 20 years ago would have been like, yeah, we're proud of this. Let's just own it. This is our name. And then for the next prophet to put in millions of dollars in a campaign of Meet the Mormons.
Right. Meet the Mormons, or I'm a Mormon campaign. To now
then have the next prophet say, we don't use that name because that's a victory for Satan. And it's really just the boisterous, narcissistic
gaslighting
definitely
of it. A great example.
We don't mean any disrespect to anybody by using Mormonism, but
we also will not, as much as we possibly can as humans, not allow ourselves to be gaslit.
Yeah.
And I think that's part of the reason. And I totally interrupted you again.
Frankly, it's just a laborious process to always say the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints, or even to say the church, because Mormons don't see another church, or to say the Church of Jesus Christ because they don't really accept that title either. So if you're going to make a title for yourself that is so laborious people don't even want to say it, then you're going to have to accept the fact that people are going to call you nicknames. And if you can't deal with that, then sucks for you, I guess, kind of.
Yeah.
Even when I was an active Mormon, that's kind of how I felt. Like, call it Mormon, call it Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints. It doesn't matter. As long as you know what you're talking about, you know you're talking to me, and that I'm a member of that church. I don't have any qualms about that one way or the other.
Yeah. All righty. So let's talk about
That was a tangent.
Yeah, that was the way we started out. Squirrel. So hey, there's our little squirrel. Thanks, Alex. So we're kind of switching gears. I think this is our last episode in the blessings series, and we wanted to talk about the blessings of healing. I have a personal story. I think I've shared it on the podcast in the past, but it is very relevant today. So I just kind of wanted to go over blessings of healings, because it is like the Mormon superpower. And I think that's what we named this episode, as it is the Mormon superpower, or blessings of healing. I know that growing up, I read the Work in the Glory series, and Mason is getting called into work, of course. Does that work, Mason? Okay, so we might have just lost Mason. I'm just going to move his chair over, and I'm going to take center stage. Hello. Mason is on call today. He is, for those of you who are newer to the show, Mason is a nurse anesthetist, and he is second call today. We decided to have the show in the afternoon, going, oh, you probably won't get called in the afternoon. But apparently we get on the show, and that's what's going to happen. Okay, so anyway, I grew up in a church where reading the Work in the Glory and hearing the stories of our history, especially the challenges that the Mormons faced as they were trying to find a place to migrate to where they would be safe and accepted. Are you going into work?
This is for tomorrow.
Oh, no work today. He's back. As they were trying to find a place before they hit the Salt Lake Valley, I remember hearing stories of miraculous healings of, was it malaria or something, when they were in the plains and everybody was sick, and then they walked around and they touched each other, and it was like people were getting up off their deathbed.
It was a story that Joseph Smith walked around Nauvoo shortly after they got there.
Right, shortly after. Yeah, so I don't know what the disease was. I want to say it was like malaria. It was mosquito-borne, I believe.
Ague, which is basically malaria.
Yeah. Walking around and doing that, I'd heard of all of these amazing stories of healing. And then, it made me feel good. I got that pick me up. And I think that those inspirational stories, they have a chemical reaction in our brain. They're supposed to. Like Mason cries over Star Wars. And he used to say, when he was teaching gospel doctrine, how, he could feel the Spirit watching movies and those types of things when there were positive lessons. And so I think that these stories of inspiration give you a dopamine rush. They're going to give you an oxytocin drop, which is going to make you feel good. And in Mormonism, we learned that those feel-good feelings meant that God was speaking to us. And so I think it's important, as we're moving forward in this episode, talking about the healing blessings, to remember that there are chemical reactions that go on in our brain that give us certain feelings or emotional states. And it's the society and the culture and the experiences that we've had that we utilize to interpret what those mean. And so if I've grown up in an environment that has told me that wash of comfortable warmth and, tears coming to my eyes and that gentle happiness is God, well, I guess Jesus or the Holy Ghost. I don't even know, the Spirit, I think, is referring to the Holy Spirit. So the Holy Ghost speaking to me on behalf of God or Jesus to tell me that what I am feeling is confirmation of factual, tangible truth. And as I've moved forward in life, I know that, and in my field as a mental health counselor, I know that our brain likes to lie to us, and that our brain is really searching for the fastest answer that makes sense first. Whether or not it's true, that is what the brain wants, because the brain is like, everything is scary. The first thing that makes sense has to be true. And, I feel good about this, confirmation bias. Therefore, it is true. And we actually get that. That's where the challenge to, read the Book of Mormon. And if you pray about it and you feel good, it must be true, but you don't need tangible evidence. Or when presented with tangible evidence, the feeling trumps the evidence. And so I think that's really important as we talk about healing blessings. Nathan, did you want to jump in with anything, or where are you at?
So my thoughts were, you mentioned feeling the Spirit, and you mentioned tangible. The church teaches that it's a tangible thing, not really in the true sense of the word of tangible.
No, I think, and I may have mixed up my words. I said that the feeling trumps tangible evidence.
Okay.
Well, that's what I meant to say anyway.
Well, and that might be, but in saying that, you're saying that it is a tangible evidence. If it trumps other tangible evidences, then it feels like they're teaching this as a tangible, you can hold it in your hand kind of a thing, even though it's not.
So what? Let me
they
just
give it
check
that kind
in.
of force, or they give it that kind of authority, as if it was something that you could, you could hold, that kind of thing.
So basically what I hear you saying is that to an individual that has been taught that their feelings are the voice of God, then that feeling is considered tangible evidence.
Yes.
Okay. Yeah. And when I use the word tangible today, I'm talking about this phone is tangible. Right. I can touch it. I can feel it. And if I hand it to Mason, he can touch it and feel it. And he can say, oh, look at all the cracks on the screen. I can run my fingers over it. And I know there are cracks there. Mason, can you run your finger over it? And, something that if I held this phone up in a conference of 4 million people, and I'd even say take the case off of it, those 4 million people are going to agree that it is a device with an apple on the back. And for those familiar with the social culture and whatnot of the iPhone, people are going to agree just by looking at the phone, yes, that is an Apple phone. And you don't need to have an oxytocin or a feel good, let me start crying over this phone to know that this phone is named Apple iPhone and is a real object that not only can I hold it and touch it and verify that it's real, but all 4 million people can, although it probably won't make it through the 4 million people because it'll probably get stuffed in somebody's pocket and disappear before I get it.
Right.
So anyway, that's what I meant by tangible.
Sure.
Another squirrel.
There's two other things. One is that talking about feeling the Spirit becomes very exclusionary.
What do you mean by that?
Well, because if, say you're in a meeting in the Mormon church or any other church, if you're talking about feeling the Spirit, like the televangelist meetings where everybody's up and praising the Lord, and if you believe you can be healed, come up to the front and we'll heal you.
Right.
If you don't want to feel excluded, you have to either accept that you're also feeling that, or you have to hide the fact that you're not feeling it. You have to act. You have to play the part because you don't want to be excluded.
Yeah.
And Mormonism and feeling the Spirit, the whole idea of feeling the Spirit kind of sets you up for that.
Right.
Because a lot of people won't feel it, but they don't want to be excluded. They don't want it. They don't want people to judge them. They don't want to feel like they're lesser because, well, if everybody's feeling the Spirit, well, why is Sarah not feeling the Spirit? Why is Mason not feeling it? Obviously, it's because he's doing something wrong in his life, which is where people will oftentimes go to. There's something wrong with you because you're not feeling what everybody else is feeling.
Right. And we're going to actually talk about that a little bit, like that. If it doesn't come to pass for you, then that's a totally Mormon-y phrase. Hey, I used to be Mormon, and it came to pass. So if whatever it is that was supposed to happen doesn't actually happen, then that means there's something wrong with the person it didn't happen to when they were expecting it. And it's most likely because of a sin or something you did bad. And I know that, when I've worked with people that are coming out of the Mormon culture in counseling, they've actually talked a lot about that. Like they spent years in an organization where everybody around them is having these amazing spiritual experiences, and they have the ability to be, I'm going to say, honest with themselves. And they're like, I'm not actually sure if this feeling is the Holy Spirit or, what is wrong with me that I'm not getting these same extravagant, dramatic. I mean, like in every ward, you're going to have a person that's like really out loud and dramatic about it, and then the people that are super quiet about it, and then everything in between. It is a spectrum. And for some people, I'm sure that it feels very real. But again, what I really want to focus on today, especially as we talk about these blessings of healing, is the factual, like the grass is green, the sky is blue. And I know that I'm going to have some, I love my autistic children that are going to talk to me about how the grass isn't actually green. But again, if you take most of the world and say, what color is that? We're all going to agree on the color of the grass that we're looking at, even in our different languages and whatnot. All of us see and experience the same color and, color schemes, whatever, spectrums. I'm going to get lost in the weeds here.
In the church,
we need one of those little icons that does the squirrel with like weeds so we can talk about getting lost in the weeds.
The church teaches you to place the blame on yourself first.
Mm-hmm.
And not that that isn't necessarily an appropriate thing to do. We always need to be in self-reflection, but they teach it to the point of it's always about me.
Right. If it's not happening this way for you, you're flawed.
But I can't look past me at any point in time and say, well, wait a second. Maybe this is an organizational thing,
mm-hmm.
which is where most of us get to when we do leave the church. It's because we've pushed past okay, wait a second. I'm always blaming myself. Let's look at this. Wait a second. There's all this kind of stuff here that I didn't know about because I had never been even allowed to pursue it.
You're forbidden to pursue it.
Right. And then the last piece of that is that there's kind of a New Testament setup for this. And what I mean by that is when Jesus comes back and shows himself to his apostles, the first time he shows himself to the 10 apostles minus 2. Judas obviously wasn't there because he had killed himself or whatever.
He turned naughty.
And Thomas wasn't there for whatever reason. And that's why he gets the name Doubting Thomas, because the apostles all come to him and say, Jesus was here, we saw him. And he says, I won't believe it unless I see the nail prints in my own hands and feet.
Right.
So Jesus comes back again. Thomas is there. Thomas says, I believe. Jesus says, blessed are you because you've believed. More blessed are they who believe without seeing. He says, you believe because you've seen. More blessed are they who will believe and haven't seen. Well, and so there's this setup of it's better. Like your testimony of the Book of Mormon, if you've read and you prayed about it and you felt that whatever feeling that you define as whatever feeling you define as the Spirit talking to you, that is better than seeing the gold plates for yourself. That's a stronger thing. So you've made this untangible thing more important, have more authority than the tangible things.
Right. I just want to point out that if any of you witnessed that little I stole his note in pen, that's just evidence of how cohesive our relationship. I'm just teasing. Okay, another squirrel.
Actually, no, that wasn't a squirrel for me. That was, I think,
taking this and then no, I agree with you. I think that story, that's why I wrote it here on the note. This you can't see our notes yet, audience, because
Let's take a quick break, and we'll be right back. The mighty and resilient Merrimack River, carving through the communities of our great region. My name is Linda Lorden, proud president of Merrimack County Savings Bank, and like the river that serves as our namesake, we're a constant yet ever-changing presence. Because to us, it's bigger than banking. It's about powering communities and putting people first. It's about knowing where you came from and where you're going. That's Merrimack style. Visit us at themerrimack.com.
The world's most exciting podcast, home of borders, language, culture. And here he is, New York Times best-selling author and National Radio Hall of Fame inductee, Michael Savage.
I'm Michael Savage, host of the Savage Nation podcast, home of borders, language, and culture. Be here or be nowhere. The Savage Nation Podcast. Catch the Michael Savage Podcast on all podcast platforms every Tuesday and every Friday.
Super special. No, I wrote it down so that way I would come back to it here in a minute. So I'm going to go ahead and switch into my story unless there's something else you want to say that kind of sets this up.
Is there a place where we can see the comments from other people? Or?
Yeah, they're right here. So if you want to leave a comment, a live comment for us, then please do. We are happy to engage with our audience. And for a lot of those comments, we'll throw them up on the screen. So if you don't want your comment to be shown in the live show, please make sure you write, do not share this with the audience. Otherwise, it's going to go up. It'll have your name just the way that it shows on your profile. So anyway, I think that I've told this story before, and I said that earlier. I just want to make sure. I must have hay or some other farm something goo on my face. That's why I'm in my hat, my t-shirt. I've been doing farm chores here. So what I really want to impress upon the audience, or let's focus on this, is what is the observable by everyone tangible evidence in this story, because I think that that's really going to lead in to how problematic the Mormon superpower of priesthood healing blessings really is. So Mormons, at least when I was going, I was taught that if a worthy priesthood holder gave me a priesthood blessing, and so the priesthood blessing is the laying on of hands, which means like this. I'm gonna put my hands on your head, and I'm going to, that was very sexy, by the way, Mason. And then I'm going to give you a blessing. And in that blessing, I'm going to pronounce some form of healing upon you. The belief is that if the person receiving the blessing is worthy and honest and doing everything right, then that blessing will come to pass. Right. And I mean that in the very literal sense. So if Mason is dying of cancer and he gets a blessing from a priesthood holder, which has to be a human with a PP, has to have a penis, not, the other girly parts, because only men hold this superpower. So anyway, he has somebody who has been authorized by the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints to give him a priesthood blessing to heal his cancer. If that person in that blessing tells Mason, you will overcome this cancer, you will be healed after your radiation treatment, the belief is that you will go through radiation and you will be healed. And the challenge is that they don't actually track. Like, I don't know of any Mormon that actually tracks the long-term outcome of these blessings. And so, like, for me as a mental health counselor, the way that I know whether or not my clients are getting better is I see them for a prescribed period of time, and we have questionnaires and we chart. And if you're honest with yourself, you can get really good information back on yourself for how effective you are as a provider. And so the longest one that I have of my in-clinic, my own research, it's like 7 years now. So I've been checking in with a couple of my clients now for over 7 years. And that is how I know that they are still managing life well, that their panic hasn't come back or whatever. And then for those that are like, hey, actually, I've been struggling, we can kind of explore why. And so that makes me know that what treatment, not know that I am effective, but that the treatment modalities I am using, how effective they are in the long term. And again, if I'm honest with myself, that gives me really good feedback as a behavioral health practitioner. And so the story is that Mason and I were visiting our in-laws. We were living in North Carolina at the time. Mason was stationed at Fort Bragg in Fayetteville, North Carolina. At this time, I would have been serving as the primary president. So I was the female in charge over all of the children in our geographical location or our ward, ages 12 and under. So if you were 11 in January, then you would have, let me phrase this, make sure. So if you were 11 on the first day of the year, even if you turned 12 in that calendar year, I still had spiritual jurisdiction over you. And so in that ward, I had anywhere, I mean, it was military wards, so the numbers fluctuated quite a bit, but about 60 to 120 kiddos at any time were under my spiritual jurisdiction, or what is I don't remember the word that they use. Stewardship. Yes, I had stewardship over them because of my calling as primary president. And Mason was serving as the first counselor in the bishopric. And this would have been during a time in our lives where both of us were super stalwart. Like at this point in life, the only doctrine that I really struggled with was the doctrine of polygamy. That one has always bothered me. And then I wasn't super happy about how the church was treating the LGBTQ plus population, but I wasn't at a point yet in my life where I had really formed how unjust the treatment was. So, and the reason I bring this up is because as far as anybody was concerned, we were righteous, doing everything that we knew how in our power to do the right thing. Well,
in a ward, you don't get much better than bishopric and
right,
primary president.
Right. Right, except for maybe when you were the bishop and I was the young women's president and had been extended the call to Relief Society.
You were a president of an organization. I was in the bishopric. From all appearances, we were doing everything correct, and the Lord approved of that because we'd been called to those positions.
And we were supposed to be richly blessed during this time. And all I can say is it was one of the hardest time periods of our life. Like, that was a rough time for us in life in general. And that is neither here nor there for the story, but I had been undergoing infertility treatments. My bishop at the time was actually my infertility doctor. And I had gotten pregnant, which is always exciting for us because of how hard it was medically for me to get pregnant and then stay pregnant and carry to term. And so I was pregnant. We were normally pretty good about not announcing those pregnancies to anybody outside of like Mason and I and the doctors and my very closest friends because of how high risk of a pregnancy I was and because I usually would miscarry before leaving the first trimester. And so we got to 13 weeks. So for those of you that are familiar with gestation for humans, once you are past the first 12 weeks of a pregnancy, your risk for miscarriage goes down substantially. And so that was kind of we can now announce this because we had gotten past that 12-week mark. Well, we went to visit Mason's parents just for whatever. We were in Fayetteville. They were in Richmond, Virginia. And we went to visit them. And I think it's important to point out that Mason's father at this time was serving as the bishop of his ward. So once again, when we're talking about this story, we are like the elite in our local church community. And all of us, like I can say, I'm certain your dad was working his absolute hardest to be good, righteous, whatever. Well, when we're at Mason's parents' house, I start bleeding, which is, of course, the first sign of a miscarriage. And I've had enough miscarriages at this point. I'm not going to go to the emergency room. I know that I just need to, let things go because I think I got pregnant 11 times and we have 3 children that were born living. So you do the math. I'd undergone several miscarriages. And so when I started bleeding, I was very sad because we had made it. I had never miscarried that late. Most of my miscarriages happened 9 weeks gestation or earlier. And so I was really shocked. This is probably the miscarriage that shook me the most. The other ones I was able to compartmentalize as, medical issues. And I was able to work through that. Well, I asked Mason's dad for a blessing. Mason had given me many blessings over the years, and I really wanted to have a strong, solid emotional connection and relationship with Mason's father, which I've never had. He's never really liked me much, mostly because I am outspoken and I'm a human with a vagina, and he doesn't like outspoken, knowledgeable humans with vaginas. That's just how that goes. Mason's over here chuckling. And in that blessing from Mason's father, he told me that I would not lose the baby. And I instantly knew that that was not accurate because of the amount of blood. I knew what my body was doing. And he definitely, he told me that that the baby would live, that I would have a healthy pregnancy, and that I needed to stop worrying about it. And I knew instantly that that was him speaking for him. And most likely he was like, I don't want to hear the tears. I don't want to hear the grief. Here's your blessing. Trust me and shut up. That's kind of, looking back, that's kind of how I feel. But at that time, we're supposed to believe that this is a very real thing. Well, we went home early because of how much I was bleeding. I went and saw my bishop / doctor in his office, and it was confirmed there was no heartbeat. And I was going to need a DNC because things just weren't cooperating medically for me. Now, in that scenario, technically, the Mormon faith would say, well, Sarah, you didn't have enough faith to be healed. And then David Bednar came out with the talk of, do you have the faith not to be healed? So now we have this free out of, well, maybe you're righteous, and they said that you would be healed, but you have the faith when it doesn't work out. So now it's nothing can be wrong with the priesthood power. So what are we going to do here? And, you know, that experience really got me thinking on, well, how often do these healing blessings actually work? And it took me until I left the church to be mature enough and willing to open my mind and think about this logically. And my thoughts led me to, if the priesthood blessing was a legit, real thing, like it is going to heal you in the way that you think it's going to heal you in the way that the Mormon church believes, well, then we should see coming out of what I'm going to call the Book of Mormon belt. So Idaho, Utah, Arizona, parts of Eastern Washington, parts of Nevada, parts of California, you should see the statistics that demonstrate extreme health and miraculous recoveries from things like cancer and diabetes and kidney failure and COVID and miscarriages and all of those things. And we don't hear about it. Like, if the Mormon church, if those priesthood blessings are in fact a superpower doing what the church claims they should do, well, then that Book of Mormon belt would have, I'm going to say, thousands, if not millions of people flocking to those areas. It would be newsworthy. Like, there would be scientific studies being done on why they have this miraculous healing rate that the rest of the world does not have. And the reason I say that is, and Mason, I'm going to have you jump in after this, is that, well, I'm going to invite you to jump in after this, is that the reason I say this is that because whenever I got sick, whether it was a stomach flu or I had hemorrhagic E. coli 2 weeks ago, if I was still Mormon, it would have been, hey, I need priesthood holders to come into my hospital room where I'm on contact precautions and in isolation because of the illness that I had. I would have had the faith to invite them into those what could be dangerous circumstances to give me a blessing. And then when I got better, I would have been like, praise Jesus, he's the one that healed me. And I would chalk that up to the superpower of the priesthood healing blessing. Now, I'm here to say I did not get that blessing, and I, am miraculously healed, except it's not really a miracle anymore because modern day medicine, very few healthy adults are going to die from E. coli 0157, which I got from bagged salad, lettuce. It was romaine lettuce, so heads up. That's where it came from.
Heads down, clean them better that way.
Yeah, clean your lettuce, y'all. But if this was a real superpower, we would see it. Like, everybody in the world would be able to see it, just like this phone. And I think that's where I'm going to pause. I'm going to have you go ahead and say things. Otherwise, I could just keep on going. So go ahead. What are your thoughts, Mason?
So I've written down a couple of things here. First off, when it comes to like healing stats, it's not uncommon for a blessing, for in that blessing, for someone to say something like follow the directions of the doctors, or I bless the doctors to have guidance in how to treat you.
Right.
After you said if you get these treatments, then you'll be okay. Well, duh. You know, that's that's like saying.
Go ahead. I'm sorry.
I
know. I'm so bad at it. I'm sorry. My ADHD is off the chart.
That's like saying if you get this chemotherapy, you're going to be okay. Well, of course, the possibility exists you're going to be okay. Otherwise, we wouldn't do the treatments.
Right.
Like if you take these antibiotics, take them all. Make sure you take them all. You're going to get better. Well, yeah, that's why we give antibiotics. So I
want to interrupt you before you move to the next.
It's kind of this cop-out like idea, like I bless you that the doctors and nurses will take good care of you. Well, of course they will. Not that medical mistakes don't happen.
Happens.
Not that those mistakes don't happen, but for the most part, that's what we're trained to do as medical professionals, is to take care of you. And for the most part, we do a good job.
Well, and I think that it's on a side note, is that when we're blessing the doctors and the nurses and whatnot, I mean, I'm not saying we shouldn't bless them, not at all. But when that shows up so consistently in these blessings, it's also an inadvertent way to say you can't trust the medical profession unless the priesthood has blessed your doctors. Like your doctors cannot function at their best unless a priesthood blessing has been administered. And we don't really trust medicine unless it shows up in a blessing. And I'm not saying that's what it's that it's subliminal, it's the implied message.
It's kind of what is being said. Yeah. I don't think it's what is intended, but by saying that is what's being said.
And once again, I look at, like members like your family who are incredibly suspicious of medical treatment unless it actually applies to them. Like, anyway, that again, tangent. I won't go there. Go ahead.
This one's a little bit longer of an example, depending on how many times I get interrupted. It's rare in a blessing, at least in my own experience, in giving blessings and receiving blessings and stories that I've heard. It's rare to hear of immediate promises. Like the Jesus type things. Do you have faith to be healed? Well, then get up, get out of your bed, walk away, let's go. Or let me put the mud on your eyes and boom, now you can see, right?
With the magic
Jesus type healings. Sure. And we're not going to, thank you for that. That's helpful. It's rare to see that. And I can think of a couple of instances in the history of the Mormon church. But let me combine two stories here. Like I know of one where I think it was Johnson was her last name. She was healed. She had like a deformity of her arm, and other people were there to document that it had happened. I don't know, what happened there. I know that 2 of her sons ended up being apostles in the first group of 12 apostles. So was there a story going on there? I don't know. I'm not here to make that judgment call.
That reminds me of the scene in, oh goodness, I'm going to mess it up. There's a scene in the movie and they're selling the medicines and the guy comes out and he's on a cane and then he drinks. What is that? Pete's Dragon. Yes. This reminds me of the scene. This was a common practice in those days where people would come through like the little medicine men and they're trying to sell their potions. And there's this huge belief in these miraculous things. And you would go and you would watch him and he comes out and he's an old man. And then you drink the juice and then you're up there like dancing. I know it's not Dick Van Dyke, but that's who I can see in my head who's doing it.
The story even plays out that way. There's a preacher talking, like another preacher comes into a sermon that Joseph Smith is giving and says, if this man really had power, then why wouldn't he heal this woman that has this arm? And so it's even played out that way. I'm not here to judge one way or the other, but it's kind of played out that way. But the other story that is probably maybe the most famous group healing story you brought up, it was in Nauvoo. It was shortly after they'd gotten to Nauvoo. They're living in a sewer, basically.
In a swamp.
In a swamp. Yes, not a sewer, a swamp. And everybody's gotten sick with malaria. Well, duh, right? That's where they chose to live, and whatever the reasons were. But then there's this miraculous story of Joseph Smith saying, all right, I'm done with this. And he gets up and he just goes out and he starts healing people. And there's all these miraculous healings that happen. Well, whether you can actually track how many people were healed, I have no idea. But let me connect another story. So that story is incredibly famous, that Joseph Smith got up and healed a whole bunch of people including Brigham Young, and I think Heber C. Kimball and some others. Well, shortly thereafter, the apostles who were supposed to have left on their missions back in April to go to the UK, who none of them had left yet, there's this story of Brigham Young and Heber C. Kimball getting into a wagon. They're basically dying.
Right, I remember that.
And they get
story.
up and they're like, we got to have the strength to at least say a hurrah to our wives, right? Whatever.
Right, like the audience that's watching us leave. We got to stand up
We
and be like,
and make them feel like it's going to be okay. Yeah, we're sick, but we're going to get through this. That's also almost as famous a story of these apostles just pushing through, and we're sick and we're dying, but we're going to go anyway. That was shortly after the healings that supposedly were done by Joseph Smith to Brigham Young, to Heber C. Kimball, and then days later they're sick again, and then they're going out on their missions.
You can buy Trauma Bonded, a true story of navigating attachments forged in complex PTSD by me, anywhere books are sold, including Audible.
And it's just this follow-up thing. Like you were talking about how there's power in touch. There's power in the feeling that somebody with authority is giving that gift to you. And so something in your body, whether it's a resurgence of epinephrine or whatever it is, physically, chemically, you feel better and you get up. But that doesn't necessarily mean that anything has really changed. You're just feeling this surgence of energy, and that's great.
Like the placebo effect. And we know it's well documented in medical study that the placebo effect can be very effective. Like we know, right? We don't know why. And like if you have a chronic illness, we know that people who come at it with, strength and happiness and acceptance, and they're looking for the good things to be grateful in, versus people who are really negative and grumpy and whatnot, that they are more likely to have negative outcomes. But the thing is that they measure those outcomes. And so for me, when it comes to the healing blessing of the priesthood within Mormonism, we're not tracking outcomes. And you're not necessarily supposed to record these blessings, and that kind of makes me suspicious. Like if this is supposed to be your superpower, it's like Batman in the cave, like I will come out at night with a deep gravelly Batman voice, but nobody actually knows who I am or where I am, and I try not to be caught, and I'm doing it behind the scenes. But again, if we back up, so we they call this like the 20,000 foot view or the 30,000 foot view. You can zoom in at the specifics and say, okay, this person feels like they got healed from whatever, and they're giving credit to their priesthood blessing. Okay, I'm not going to say, nope, that wasn't the priesthood, at least not to their face. I might behind their back, which makes me a total, biatch. But all right, I'm an apostate. Don't tattoos are bad. So
this is like a hint
right
tattoo
for those who are not watching us, I have tattoos up my arms here. So for me, let's look at the outcomes that we can measure. And again, if we're looking at the death statistics and the statistics for chronic disease and illness across the United States, if the superpower was real, if that is in fact how it works, where are the numbers that prove that? Because I guarantee if you had this cleansing, everybody here is healthier than the rest of the world, and like you can go talk to somebody from the Mormon church or the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints and get yourself a blessing. And as long as you believe in that blessing, you're going to get it. Like Mason, you had brought up earlier today, like in the Bible, people followed Jesus around because it had been rumored all of these like truly miraculous healings, right? And so he had a little entourage. And that goes back to your seen and not seen example of those who saw me and believed, and those who didn't see it and believed. They both walked away with a belief that Jesus had been resurrected as he said he would. They both got that, but those who had believed it without seeing got an extra perk. Well, if you take that same example and you now apply it to the Mormon church, who they will say, well, unless you are a member, living up to your covenants, all these ifs, if you're this, and this, and you get this blessing and you believe it will heal you, then you'll be healed. Well, there are people out there who would truly believe that, especially if they could see it. You know, it's that's supposed to be the verifying factor or the qualifying. That's not supposed to be the qualifying factor. Where are the numbers? Where are the treatment outcomes? Where is it? Because if it's actually working, it should be so observable based on the population. And every time you get even the sniffles in Mormonism, you're supposed to seek a blessing to get well. Where is the data that supports it? And I have looked online and I haven't found any.
So there's two other things I want to add.
Great.
This one is new from what you just said.
Okay.
There's another New Testament setup. How often did Jesus heal someone and follow it up with saying, don't tell anybody? Well, the funny thing for me is that the New Testament, as we have it, was written, 50, maybe 100, maybe 200 years later than the events actually happened.
Right.
What is the benefit of adding that piece of the story at that point in time? If it was, in fact, Jesus was, I don't want these crowds. I don't want people following me because they can get healed. I want them following me for the right reasons. Okay, fine, whatever. But 100 years later, that's gone. That's not what's going on. But what it is it's a cop-out. We don't want to talk about healings. We don't want to talk about priesthood blessings because sometimes maybe they're going to happen, and most of the time they're not going to happen. We don't want to talk about it. We don't want follow-up. We don't want statistics. We don't want validation that they're working. And the modern day example of that, which was the second thing I want to talk about, was this what you mentioned, David Bednar, talking about, do you have the faith not to be healed? And he's not the only one that said this now.
Right.
But what that question does is it undermines your priesthood authority completely. It undermines it completely because what you've said is
no longer is.
Whether or not the priesthood says you will be healed, if it doesn't happen, do you have the faith not to be healed? That's BS.
Right. It's the cult circular reasoning.
Right. It's the cop-out that says if you're not healed, it's because of your faith, because you are now accepting that that's the path the Lord wants for you. If you are healed, it's because of your faith, and you're accepting that that's the path that the Lord wants for you.
But then
either way, you're accepting the path that God wants for you. It doesn't have anything to do with you.
Right. But then you're calling God a liar because these priesthood blessings are believed to be God's voice spoken through the priesthood holder for you. So
that happens all the time too.
Right. So God is like, you're going to be healed. You're going to be fine. And then it doesn't happen. And then now you have an apostle saying, well, do you have the faith to not believe God? Do you have, so it becomes this mumbo jumbo mess. And so, as we wrap up today, I really want to say, focus on the outcome. Get that, sometimes we need to be zoomed all the way in on the detail. But keep in mind that when you're zoomed all the way in on those minute details, you're missing the big picture. And those who are most wise in this world know when to zoom in and do so, when to zoom out and do so, and when to be somewhere in the middle on that. I would say look at the outcomes and look at the outcomes recognizing that confirmation bias is a very real thing. If I want it to be true, then I am more likely to look at or interpret evidence in a way that makes my thoughts and feelings true or right. Like the human brain, body, it wants to be right. If you don't believe me, go look at your middle schoolers. Doesn't matter what's going on with middle schoolers. They will fight that they are the right one, the smart one, that their answers are. It's a developmental phase. It's a normal thing. The human brain wants to be right now, the fastest, and your brain will do that with a great deal of confidence because it's a survival skill. If I'm right and my path is the right one, I feel safe. I feel comfortable, because being wrong feels uncomfortable, unsafe, and threatening. So I want to challenge you, look at the data, check in with people who agree with you and people who don't agree with you. Listen to the evidence that's around you that doesn't match your previously held belief. This is where, if the priesthood blessing, if the priesthood power is what the Mormon Church claims it is, especially with regards to the healing blessing, well, then what are the statistics? Where's the data that demonstrate? And I'm talking about the tangible data. Like, I can go into Utah and I can count how many people got cancer, how many people got healed from it, when the expectation would be that they would not be. What are those numbers? And then let's publish them. Let's keep that open. And this is going to apply for you in multiple facets of your life. In your parenting, in your relationships, in, projects, work relationships, everywhere. You can apply this, zoom in, zoom out, check the data, and listen to people who agree with you and disagree with you, and truly take, especially those who disagree with you, take into deep, honest consideration what their thoughts and opinions are before making up your mind about how the world works or how your specific situation will work. And only then can you really check in and decide what feels factual, like this is an Apple iPhone. If I took the cover off, here I will. I'm going to pop your phone out of its cover here, Mason. This phone.
That's necessary.
Oh my gosh, I have to. If I don't, I can't. Oh, I'm sorry. I don't need anything. Go away, Siri. It has the Apple symbol on the back. Most people with this phone in their hands, millions of people are going to agree. This is an Apple iPhone. It is not a knockoff, although some people will challenge it just because, we have to have conspiracy theorists in the world. But the majority of the people in the world will agree with you that the grass is green, the sky is blue, trees grow, they need oxygen and water to do so, photosynthesis, blah, 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 blah. And this isn't about being right or wrong. It's about being informed so that you can navigate your existence in a manner that works best for you and honors your authenticity, whether it's part of the group you're in or not. And I'm going to get off my end of show soapbox. Mason, is there anything else you would like to
there's
add?
one more thing that I want to kind of say here, is that the whole process when it comes to blessings, priesthood blessings, is a setup. And let me explain why that's the case. What's happened is you've been put into an organization that claims that it has all the answers and all the necessary pieces for salvation, for you to go back to God. I have it all. I have all the answers you need to do what I'm telling you is to do.
Right, and I'm going to add to that. And the authority to make sure it happens for you.
Right.
So not just the answers, but the authority to make it happen. Keep going.
In my head, I already include that. That's an important piece as well, too. So what they say is, this is what we've got. We have the answers. God has given them to us. If you want to go back to God, this is the prescribed outline, the prescribed path in order to do that. And then it starts adding in all these other things. Oh, and by the way, we also have priesthood authority so that we can give you blessings. We can heal you just like Jesus did. But what's happened is they've already set the premise. They hold your salvation. They essentially, to put it a little crassly, they hold your balls in their hand. They have you.
Don't squeeze.
In their hand. Your salvation is mine to control. If you don't do it my way, you don't get the salvation. So then they offer out all these other blessings of, healing or prosperity or whatever, all these things, they offer out all these other blessings, but they all have to be reconciled back to salvation. Meaning, if I get healed, it's because God chose to heal me. Wow, my faith is even stronger. If I don't get healed, I have to somehow come to terms with the fact that this is still true. So whatever I do with that blessing, not being healed, not healed, it can be, do I have the faith not to be healed? What's wrong with me?
Right,
is there something wrong with the priesthood holder? Is it just not the right time? Does God want me to go to the doctor instead? Does God want me to take these herbs instead? I have to find an answer, because this thing can't be wrong.
Right. And it stops you from trusting yourself and leaning into your own intuition, because your intuition, the credit for your own internal intuition is given away to an external authority. And frankly, I am amazed. I look at like my horses out in the field. I put out a lick tub. So a lick tub, for those of you who don't do much with horses, a lick tub is a great big bucket that has essential vitamins and minerals in it, and it's packed in this really thick molasses paste. And when the horses need the minerals, they will go lick it up themselves. They just know. Nature just tells them. They go, they lick up the minerals, and when they don't need it, they leave it. And it's been really interesting to me to see them on these really hot summer days we've had recently. They're going to that lick tub all the time. And then they go back out to pasture to graze. So they come in, lick tub, water, graze, lick tub, water, graze. It's like just watching them in this circle. Their bodies know, they know how to trust nature. They know what to do. And our bodies are the same. Like when I'm thirsty, my body alerts me to that. So we need to learn how to trust our bodies. We need to look at those outcomes. I think that's all I have to say about today.
That was the end of my comments as well.
Well, thank you. I hope that our audience has enjoyed our series on blessings. If you have any questions or comments, please feel free to reach out to us at DaisyGirlCommunications.com. Communications has an S at the end. So again, that is DaisyGirlCommunications.com, or you can email us at DaisyGirlCommunications@gmail.com. If you'd like to throw us a couple bucks and support the show, you can do that here through our Venmo link. We are very grateful. We've had a couple people just send us $1 or $2. That $1 or $2 really adds up. And we utilize those funds to make sure that our production team is getting paid an industry standard fair wage. I want to make sure that the people who are working for us are being compensated in a way that allows them to support their families. So if you want to support us in making that happen for our production team, you can do that. The other thing is that my book, Trauma Bonded, I recently went to an event and had several people come up to me and tell me how they couldn't put my book down and they learned so much. It's a great place if you want to get to know us better and kind of connect with some of the trauma that we have been through that has led us to this point where we are comfortable speaking out. We don't talk about the Mormon Church, or I don't talk about the Mormon Church exclusively in the book Trauma Bonded. Rather, it is the setting in which a lot of my trauma occurred. And it was the structure that we utilized to navigate many of the trials in our life that ultimately led to us leaving. And you don't see the leaving in the book. It is mentioned. But I think the best compliment I've received on the book is I couldn't put it down, or I learned that I'm not alone. And those really just fill my heart with so much joy, because that is why I wrote the book. You can get that book wherever books are sold. So wherever you enjoy shopping for books, you can get it there. We also have the Audible version. So the audiobook is exclusive to Audible at this time. But that is also available. And keep your eyes out. It occasionally does go on sale. I think it goes on sale again here in the next couple of months. So, if you don't want to spend money for that and you want to get it while it's on sale, make sure you put that in your wish list and your notifications so you can see when that comes up available for sale. So thank you so much for joining us today. We're really excited to have been with you. And our Unpacking with Sarah thing, we are super behind because I got a hemorrhagic E. coli, and that kind of took me out
And a
for a lot
barn and a
longer,
few
and
other
lots of different
things,
things going on. But we should be getting that started here in July or August, and that will be complete with worksheets and, it basically think psychoeducation and things that you can do at home, and when to identify that you need to go ahead and go into a professional. But you are going to be walking away with the first 12 to 24 weeks of the psychoeducational piece that I teach all of my clients or patients in my counseling and coaching practice here. And so we're really excited about getting that launched. And when we do launch that, I will be releasing an episode a week, and there will be some of the materials behind a paywall. And again, that pay helps us make sure that we are supporting our production team with an industry standard livable wage. So thank you again so much. Alex, if you can throw up that Venmo slide again. We will see you next time. Thank you, everybody. Bye-bye.
Deuces.
Hi, the boss.